Chapter 17. Telltale Film. In another minute, the pain in Nancy and Ned's hands became unbearable. She leaned forward and spoke to the taxi driver, requesting him to stop at a drugstore. He put on speed and soon parked in front of Albert's pharmacy. Nancy and Ned jumped out of the taxi and ran inside. A short, energetic Englishman, seeing them rush in, hurried up behind the counter. "I'm Mr. Albert," he said. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, we got acid on our hands by accident," Ned told him. "Please," Nancy spoke up. "May we have some oil quick to put on our hands?" Mr. Albert looked at the reddened hands. "Are you sure it is oil that you want?" The couple's hands hurt so badly they could hardly stand still. Fidgeting about, Nancy pleaded with the proprietor. "We don't know what the acid is, so I figure oil is the best thing." "Well, perhaps you're right," Mr. Albert conceded. "Once when I was a boy—" Nancy lost patience. "Please, please, bring us any kind of oil at once." The man blinked, then reached up to a shelf behind him and brought down a bottle of mineral oil. He opened it for them, and the suffering couple poured it liberally on their hands. By this time, Mr. Albert looked a little worried. "I will give you the name of a good doctor," he said. "Nobody should ignore a dreadful condition like that. Where have you been?" Nancy and Ned hardly heard the loquacious man. Though the pain in their hands had eased a bit, both felt that if they could only douse them into oil up to the wrists, there would be a better chance of it penetrating the skin and offsetting the effects of the acid. "Mr. Albert," said Nancy, "would you please bring us basins so that we can put our whole hands into oil?" The druggist seemed loath to do this. He acted afraid to have them in his shop. "Listen, Mr. Albert," Ned said. "I know we are a lot of trouble to you, but this is an emergency. No telling what might happen to us before we could get to a doctor." The man gazed at Ned for several seconds, as if reluctant to accede to his request. Finally, he invited them into a back room and brought down 2 small basins from a shelf. He poured large quantities of mineral oil into each. Nancy and Ned submerged their hands. Mr. Albert continued to make pessimistic statements. "That acid could be poisonous and already going through your system," he said dolefully. "I'm sure it hasn't," Nancy said. She took her hands out of the oil. "All the burning has stopped." Ned tested his. "Mine seemed to be all right." By this time, Bess and George had come to see what was happening. They were relieved to hear that Nancy and Ned were better and ready to go. Ned paid the druggist for the mineral oil, and Nancy thanked him for his kindness. Once more, the group set off. The main part of Mombasa was situated on a large island and was reached by crossing a causeway. There was a large harbor with ocean liners and cargo vessels from many countries tied up. The taxi went directly to an oceanfront hotel with beautiful gardens and a swimming pool. "Isn't this attractive?" Bess exclaimed. Professor and Mrs. Stanley and the rest of the group were waiting for them on the steps of the portico. Nancy and Ned did not mention what had happened. Bert insisted upon staying behind to take care of the baggage. He wrapped a newspaper around the handle of Nancy's bag before picking it up and refused to let either the taxi driver or porter touch it. Bert carried the suitcase to his own room and scrubbed the handle thoroughly with soap and water before delivering it to Nancy's room. As he came in with the bag, Bert said, "Nancy, who do you think put acid on the handle?" "I can't name any one person," she answered, "but I'm sure it was one of the people connected with the Sapphire mystery." George spoke up. "It must have been done in Nairobi. Let's hope the villains have left behind." Nancy was sure they had not been, but she did not intend to let this latest vicious act of her enemies deter her from continuing her detective work. The Stanleys had arranged that the Emerson Safari be given an early lunch so they could have a full afternoon for sightseeing. The incident of the suitcase had not been told to anyone but the Stanleys, who were solicitous and worried. Nancy and Ned assured them their hands felt all right. "I have arranged separate tours for you young folks," said the professor. He explained that several taxis had been hired. Nancy, Bess, George, and Gwen would go in one. Aunt Millie Stanley smiled. "The professor and I thought that the girls might be interested in different things from the boys. Your drivers have been instructed where to take you." In a short time, the taxis arrived. The 4 girls climbed into the first one, and the driver set off. He was a pleasant, smiling black who spoke Swahili and perfect English. "First, I thought you would be interested in seeing our many fruit markets," he said. "You know Africa is noted for its melons, pineapples, and berries." He drove to a wide thoroughfare with fruit stalls on both sides of the street. "Look!" Bess exclaimed. "I've never seen such big oranges in my life." Presently, Nancy asked the driver if it would be permissible for her to take a couple of snapshots of a street scene. She knew that African blacks often did not like to have their pictures taken. "I think it will be all right." Nancy stepped out of the car and took one picture lengthwise of the street and one of a fruit stand. As she got back into the taxi, a tall, muscular black came racing across the street. He began waving a fist at her and speaking rapidly in Swahili. "What is he saying?" she asked the driver. "He is demanding your camera because you took his picture." "But I didn't," Nancy replied. "I snapped the whole fruit stand from way over here." The tall man continued to gesticulate and talk rapidly. By this time, a crowd had gathered around the car. "Why does he want the camera?" George asked. The driver explained that people who belong to certain tribes believe that if their picture is snapped, it will take away their soul. "I see," said Nancy. "But I didn't snap this person's picture." The tall man shook his fist at her again and said in halting English, "You give me film or I have you arrested." "Don't you do it, Nancy," George cried out. But Bess and Gwen were terrified and begged her to turn the film over to him. At that moment, they all noticed a tall, handsome black officer hurrying toward them. He wore a white suit and helmet. Smiling, he listened to the protesters' demand, then said to Nancy, "Please tell me your side of the story." She explained. Apparently he believed her, for he turned to the tall man, spoke a few sentences in Swahili, and dismissed him with a wave of his hand. The fruit dealer was reluctant to give in, but was finally persuaded to go back to his stand. The policeman scattered the crowd, and the taxi drove off. "Oh my," said Bess. "I was scared silly. I think I'm going to faint." George turned to her cousin with a withering look. "Don't be a ninny," she said. As they drove through one street after another, the girls were intrigued by the costumes of the Indian and the Arab citizens. Some men were wearing turbans with feathers stuck in them, others red fezzes. Nearly everyone wore sandals, but many of the blacks were barefoot. Their guide stopped near a Hindu temple. It was a beautiful white, gold-domed building. A long courtyard led to a high-roofed portico with several steps leading up to it. A sign reminded the visitors to remove their shoes. "Oh, look ahead," Bess whispered. As the 4 girls walked through the portico, they stopped to admire a large, oblong pedestal on which rested the image of a white cow. It was gaily decorated with garlands of flowers and scarfs. Gwen asked the meaning of this. "I've read," Nancy told her, "that in the Hindu religion the cow is a sacred animal and is never killed or eaten." At the end of the portico and down several steps was a small room. Here were priests and worshippers, bowls of what looked like grain, and pots of incense. Since the visitors did not understand the significance, they bowed politely to those inside and turned away. The next stop was in a commercial area where ivory auctions took place twice a year. Buyers came from all over the world. The warehouse manager showed the girls around. Tusks of elephant and rhino ivory lay on the floor. "Is this made into jewelry and figurines?" Bess asked him. "No, Kenya ivory is too soft. Most of it is used for billiard balls. Hard ivory comes from Uganda. It goes to Hong Kong and Japan for carving." Nancy stepped among the great tusks. Near the end of the building were 2 huge elephants' feet. Nancy felt them and was surprised that they were covered with long, bristly hairs. When she returned to the entrance, George was saying, "What would a rhino tusk be worth?" "In an auction, the price varies," the manager replied. "But the last one I sold brought $700. "Whee!" George exclaimed. "When I saw those mean rhinos at Treetops Inn, I had no idea they were worth so much money." Bess giggled. "You'd have to pay me a lot more than $700 to capture one." The girls thanked the warehouse manager and returned to the taxi. Their driver took a side road which led to a village of wood carvers. The natives lived in attractive wooden houses. Beyond them was an open-air thatched roof factory where carved figures of animals and ceremonial masks were made from mahogany tree trunks. Groups of men were chipping out the rough statuettes. Others were doing the more delicate carving. Some workers were sandpapering, and still others doing the final polishing. The results were satin-smooth, graceful figures of wild animals, and every type of mask, from pleasant-looking to the most grotesque. Nancy went up to one of the series of small shops where the objects were displayed on rugs on the ground. "My father would love this," she said to the other girls, picking out a rhino. She also bought a diker for her Aunt Eloise and an alund for Hannah Gruen. Nancy paid for the articles. As the shopkeeper gave her change, he suddenly stared at Nancy and said, "You follow me." Nancy was startled. She had thought these people friendly. What was going to happen now? The man, as if sensing her surprise, added, "All girls come. I make you death mask." End of chapter 17.